everyone, it's Holmes from Holmes Storybooks, and I'm here today to recommend you Queer First Nations poetry collections. In this series, I take books that are similar or have similar themes and group them together for you conveniently, so if you like one, you have a selection to choose from. Let's get on with the book, shall we? The first author I'd like to talk about is Tommy Pico. Pico wrote a collection called IRL, which is a poem in the form of one single text message. Pico comes from the Kumeyaay Nation and now lives in Brooklyn, and I believe he runs a poetry podcast with Morgan Parker, who wrote There Are Things More Beautiful Than Beyonce. IRL is chatty, playful, visceral, and sticky. I loved how he manipulated language and kept the words honest. Because it's written like a text message, you sometimes get abbreviated words, but it never feels out of place, and interestingly, it's inconsistent without being forced, which is how I tend to write text messages. I love how queer this collection is and how Pico builds himself up and breaks himself down again. There's so much humor and self-deprecation in his work, and it gives a really clear picture of how he navigates through his life. Tommy Pico is the world's Puck, and Brooklyn is his forest in A Midsummer Night's Dream. This is a pastel pink rebellion at its best, and I give it 5 stars. The next collection I want to talk about is Full Metal Indigiqueer by Joshua Whitehead. Whitehead is an OG Cree Two-Spirit member of the Pequot First Nation. The Pequot First Nation is one of the biggest First Nations communities in Manitoba, and one of my friends is from that nation, so it was a pleasure to see that name come up again. This collection is a genre-bending, format-twisting, language-curling trip of a read. Whitehead is a cyberpunk, decoding and decolonizing, breaking rules and rewriting his own narrative. Whitehead's voice is sweet and a little melancholy and beautiful all the same. He takes text and words and makes them dance across the page, through pictures, up and down, and I love that. Poetry doesn't have to fit into a certain format to be beautiful or to be understood. At first, the formatting was difficult to read, but then I took my time and I realized that his poetry was all the more beautiful for the effort. His use of binary code was particularly interesting, and I love that so much of his poetry focuses on identity and what I means. His words are tender and precious and so full of love. I gave this collection 4 stars. I'm really looking forward to his new novel, Johnny Appleseed, in the spring of 2018, published by Arsenal Pulp Press. The third collection I'd love to talk about is This Wound is a World by Billy Ray Belcourt. Belcourt is from the Driftpile Cree Nation, and he manages to take really complex topics like identity, violence, and self-love, and crosses boundaries in a way that's hard to describe. He uses really simple, pure, unadulterated language, and I feel proud of him for writing this work. This is part memoir, part manifesto, all in the form of poetry. This is sexy, tender, and just the right shade of melancholy that comes through in a lot of queer work. My favourite poems were OK Cupid and The Oxford Journal, which gathered momentum in a beautiful way. This collection feels like a love song, and I already want to read more of it. The final collection I want to discuss today is Passage by Gwen Benaway. Benaway is a trans Two-Spirit poet, and she is Anishinaabe and Métis. I read this collection in one sitting. The poems were so easy to read. Often when I read poetry, I can feel myself dissecting the text, breaking down its language, reacting to it, mulling over it, and whatever else. It is a labor, but a total labor of love. That didn't happen with this collection. In this case, Passage was just so easy to read, I never felt like I was reading poetry as we were made to do in high school. I appreciated this collection a lot. Her poems never felt too wordy or complex or too clever. Benaway is Anishinaabe and Métis and trans, so there was a lot about self-love, about identity, about learning and unlearning in here. But it never felt difficult or like work. Deeply rooted in place and transcending boundaries of gender, sex, love, and memory, Benaway conjures up some beautiful imagery. It was so lovely to be able to read something where I could so easily picture something she was describing. Mountains, trees, the changing of the seasons. Benaway made it all accessible to me, and that feels like such an honor to experience. This connection flows like water, carving out a place for belonging like water does to a canyon. In this series, I love to read some of Gregory Schofield's work. Schofield is a queer Métis man, and I heard him do a poetry reading in 2017, and I was really drawn to his work. It's very unique, and sometimes disturbing and intensely personal. He's very prolific, so I have a lot to choose from, including Witness I Am, Love Medicine, and One Song and Thunder Through My Veins, Memoirs of a Métis Childhood, all poetry collections. That's it for this video, and I hope to make a second part as well as many more in this series of Holmes Recommends. Do you have a series you'd like me to look into? Are you interested in reading any of these books? Let me know down in the comments below. Bye everyone!